Welcome to Purpose by Design with Dr. Pamela Hinkle, a platform for people to share their stories, a place where change and healing can begin. Dr. Pamela stands on the fact that we are here on purpose, with a purpose by design, and not by default. Thank you for joining us for part 2 with Noah Johnson.
Ella had asked specifically if you would share your vape in the lake story when we were in Brunswick, and she kept saying to me, over there, that's where he threw it in the lake. And I was like, who are you talking about? And then she would play the song again for me. And she, Chris's song, and that's Noah. That's Noah. And I was like, well, which one's Noah? Because then there were so many of you, and I was learning who people are. And then we met for lunch, you and Noah and us and my family, and you shared your story, and I just sat there with my mouth on the floor. Okay, now I totally understand, Bella, why you were so impacted by that. So it's a great story. Would you share it with us?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what's cool is, just to kind of give context, is I met Doug and started this relationship, and as he's pouring in truth, all these things and all these vices that I've shared throughout the podcast up to this point, like God started just like, it was just like it just dropped, like fell right off of me, like the drugs, alcohol, the porn, all this kind of, it just fell right off of me. But like, one of the things that just kind of stayed lingering was this, this little jewel. And some people may know what a jewel is, some may not. It's just like this little, like, vape about this big, super simple, like, like mainstream vape that was just really easy to carry, and didn't leave had all these reasons why I walked around with it. And but anyway, by that time I had been meeting with Doug, and we were going through truth, but I was also meeting with Chris and another guy named Bailey, and we were, in this Bible study, and we would seek to just get up and read scripture out of the pavilions at our local college. And so we're talking about meeting, and I get ready to go out there, but I just feel in my heart, like, anybody who has this relationship with God knows that there's moments when he asks us to do stuff and our heart just kind of starts pounding, because it's like we know that we're supposed to do something, but then internally we're all kind of like wrestling with how to go about doing that, and all this kind of stuff. But like, my heart was pounding because I knew that God was leading me to get rid of this vape. And for me, it just goes back to this: I had to trust that God was God, and he knew what he was doing. Like, with all the things that I never saw myself being able to let go of, like the drugs and all this kind of stuff, it was like he gave me an opportunity. And when I let go of them, I found that on the other end of my obedience was life, more life than what I was experiencing with those things.
I love that.
You know what I
mean?
mean?
So, Noah, I got to stop you. That was so powerful. You said on the other side of obedience. Say that again. That was so good.
So on the other side of my obedience, there was a life, and there was I was reading about it this morning, like inheritance. Like, so in my obedience to God, there was an inheritance that was waiting on me, that God wasn't going to, like, he's not going to force me to do these things. He's going to give me an opportunity to. But on the other end of my, obedience is this inheritance of me obeying him. And that kind of ties into another thing where it's like, we all are kind of in this pruning seasons with God, where he asks us to give up things. And so for me, through going through that, I just really believe that God is God is not going to ask us to give something up that he's not willing to fill that gap with, or fill that void with, that we otherwise would assume, oh, well, if I give this up, then what am I going to do? Or how am I going to be able to operate, or how am I going to be able to do whatever? And it's like, man, if you can just trust him, just give God the opportunity to be God. And I guarantee you, like, he will not let you down. His eternal righteousness is not going to be hinged on you personally. I believe that we are not that valuable individually where God is going to forfeit his eternal righteousness on me. He loves me. He has sent Jesus for me, but he is not going to hinge his eternal character and nature on me. Like, and I'm going to get to experience the blessing of his eternal character. But anyway, going back to the story, that's kind of a complete side tangent. So anyway, I'm walking out here to this Bible study, and there's these pavilions, but then there's this huge lake that our college has. And man, I'm just sitting there feeling like I really need to get rid of this vape. And so I get out there, and me, Chris, and Bailey, we're talking about stuff, and we have our Bibles open. But in the whole entire time in my mind, I know that there's something that I'm supposed to do that is just for me in this moment. And so anyway, I'm like, we're sitting there going through stuff. I'm like, hey guys, like, I really feel like I need to throw this vape away. Like, this is the last thing that I am holding on to that identifies me with my past life, meaning monetary, like physical things. Like, obviously there's pride and all this kind of stuff I'm working through, but as far as physically, this is the last thing that is identifying me with my old life. And I feel like now is the moment that God's leading me to get rid of it. Like, just get rid of it. And so anyway, like, what was cool is like they were super supportive, you know, like we're like, oh yeah, dude, let's do it, man, you know. So like, once again, I grew up playing baseball, so I know how to use my body, I know how to throw. Like, it wasn't just one of those throws where it was just like, you know,
Right.
I'm going to throw this as hard and as far as I could because I wanted to be done with it. Like, I did not want to be bound by this sinful thing that has like kept me where I'm at. And so anyway, I walk over to the edge of the lake and I'm sitting there, and I was sitting there holding it in my hand, and I was looking at it because like I'm not the type where it was like, oh, I'm just going to wean myself off of this and quit. Like, I either am all in or I'm not. So I had to make it hurt. Like, I had to be done with it. And so anyway, I walk over to the lake and I'm sitting there and I hold it and I just kind of like look at what this thing represented to me, and like sit there for a second and I look out in this lake, and like, man, I just remember in that moment, like I literally just reared back as hard as I could and I threw this vape as far as I could into this lake. And I remember in that moment, once again, still as a young believer, I remember in that moment, it was almost like spiritually something went with it. Like it was the last thing that I was holding on to. It was the last thing that like physically I felt like God was leading me to get rid of. And just, I remember when I threw it as hard as I could, I tangibly felt in that moment something go with it. And it was like, I can't describe it, but it was just really, really, like really powerful for me. And it sealed the deal of like, man, I'm going to just commit to this wholeheartedly. Like this life with God, like what he's called me to. Like, there's no more turning back after this. And it was just super powerful. Like, at least for me, you know. And like later down the road, you know, Chris ended up putting it in one of his songs that even now I go back to at times when I listen to it. You know, I just listen to the whole song because it was a really, really cool song. But I go back to him putting that verse in there, and it just brings me back to a season that, man, God was just mightily revealing himself through just the letting go of these things and the friendship and the brotherhood that I had with Chris, and just the way that God revealed himself as my first love. If I could put it in any way, it was that in all those things, he just revealed his love to me, you know, and just patiently walked with me through all these different scenarios and situations.
You know, this story is so powerful, and can I share something with you?
Yeah, of course.
I think it'll be a blessing. So, you know, you talked about how something physical, like it just broke, and you know, God has us do things, right, specifically in times of our life that it's like there's a door of opportunity right then, and if we'll take it, if we'll take advantage of it, it's right there, right then. And you did.
Right.
I'm thinking about how, you know, you felt that break off of you, like literally that assignment broke off of you, whatever, you know, it was done, it was over. But you didn't know, Chris didn't know, I didn't know, Bella didn't know. Nobody knew the depth of the ripple effect of you throwing that in. Like that would, just us sitting here today, like that song, that it would be put in a song.
Yeah.
It would be put on a t-shirt, because I believe my daughter has that t-shirt. that it would be part of what pulled like us down to Brunswick to meet you all. You know, that I would know that song, like, you know, that because of my daughter, that I would know that song. And so I'm saying this because there's so many others that hear that music or have heard that, or maybe they've been hooked on that vaping, right?
Yeah.
And they're like saying, I'm going to throw it in the lake. Like when you threw that, what you threw into motion, the things of the spirit that got thrown into motion, when you threw that, the song was created, the t-shirt was created, and in many aspects, the podcast here and this interview, you know what I mean? Like there was so much. So I really feel like that breaking off of you was, yes, you being set free, but it was sending into motion.
Yeah.
So many things that we just don't realize. What you, going back to what you said before, that act of obedience, that act of obedience, what it can do for you. Come on back in. That when you felt that break off of you, it was a deliverance for you. It was so many things for you.
Yeah.
But it was actually breaking into the future of all that was going to be coming, just simply because that one act of obedience. Oh, we just don't realize how important, and the reciprocal, the ripple effect of that. And, you know, and here we all are as part of that ripple effect. So thank you for throwing it in the lake, because like, you know, we just don't realize all that comes from that. It's so cool. So anyways, so what I'd like to do now is I would like to ask you to share with us what you're doing at VSM. Can you tell us now, again, like, oh my gosh, I'm going back to this whole thing of you throwing the vape in the lake and the ripple effects of that. And now I'm asking you, so what do you do at VSM? Like, I can't just make that just a segue. I have to say, like, do you see what the acts of obedience have produced? When you threw that, it wasn't just God setting you free from a tobacco, nicotine, or whatever else you were putting in there. You know, that's not what it was. That was part of it because he cares about your life. That was part of it because he cares about your health, right? But beyond that, there's this call on your life. There's this song that's going to be written. Beyond all of that, there is this ministry that you are going to serve at, and you are going to change people's lives through it. Potentially all connected back to one act of obedience. So one act of obedience, fast forward, here we are. You're sitting, obviously, you have the VSSM.
At the hub.
You're at the hub and doing your podcast with us from the hub. So tell us, what do you do at VSM? And I know the summer is like gearing up. You guys are going to be busy with camps and kids and teens, and oh my goodness. So tell us what you do.
Okay. So just the question, are you wanting me to share what our heartbeat as a ministry is, or what Noah personally does through VSM?
Well, a little bit of both, actually.
Okay,
I mean, Doug has been on and he has shared what the ministry does. If you want to touch on that, you can go ahead and do that. But yes, we want to hear what you're doing at the ministry. But please share about the ministry.
So VSM, ultimately VSM is just 3 letters. I'll start off by saying that because, one of the things that we have to proactively fight against is people who attach themselves, like, for example, someone may go and meet me and Doug, or me, Doug, and Mason. And, because of our love and because of our heartbeat and our desire to go and win favor, get into the heart of this kid so that in hopes that we can share with them life, it'll be a really amazing experience. And then instead of them saying, man, I had such a great time with Doug and Mason and Noah, they'll say, oh, I had such a great time with VSM, which obviously we represent VSM, but VSM is just 3 letters. You know what I mean? It's the people within, I guess you could say, our ministry that really make what we do as effective and valuable. I believe, not saying that we're any more valuable or effective than anybody else, but at least for what we do, we fight for the relationship of things. And my story, if you're, for those who have followed it all the way to this point, is based out of how do we go and fulfill the Great Commission of creating disciples? Obviously, in this culture, we don't have one to where I can walk by Billy, who is, 12 or 13 years old and say, hey, Billy, come and follow me. And Billy
Right.
leave his home, his school, like his family, and come and just like follow this 24-year-old guy, Noah, around and just see what God's going to use Billy for. So in that, just because our culture changes doesn't mean truth changes. And so, so in that, our heart is to find ways through action sports or through relationship or through even service projects to almost cast a net into a generation of people, young and old, to see if we can find those who have ears to hear the truth that we desire to share, which is relationship with God, um, and 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 whatever God may use to call, like to awaken them. The same thing it was for me. It was someone making a statement as to it's not me who's holy, but it's God who makes me holy. That was truth that, when spoken, awakened a desire within me that through a sequence of events has led me to hear. I believe there's people out there who all it's going to take is being in the right atmosphere at the right time, hearing or meeting the right people that could radically launch them into what God has called them to be. So our heart isn't to passively wait for those people to come to us as if everyone's just going to know that if they walk in at 1208 Gloucester between certain hours throughout the week, that there's going to be people in there who desire to meet with them. Obviously, God can do that, but our heart is that we should be actively pursuing and finding ways, creating avenues to go and meet people where they are. And the way that God has given us favor is in the action sports community. And so, you spoke on it, or you just touched on a minute ago, where we're gearing up for our summer. So anything from surf camps to skate camps to opening up our facility in the afternoon. We have a yard ride that we do for single moms, elderly, widowed, disabled. And then we also seek to create events throughout the month or throughout the week that would draw even more people in. And I guess to kind of segue into what I do as a part of VSM is and this is a part of, once again, the relationship that I have with Doug, is my responsibility is creating and seeing through certain events that we have the desire to do, to where it just then can create a space for the people within our ministry, the people who want to volunteer and are part of our family, to come and serve and to get around people who otherwise we wouldn't be able to. And so a good example of that is June 8th, we have a skate contest that we're doing down here. And part of my responsibility is making sure we have all the content, the merchandise, some of the things that just we need in order to create this event and see it through. And obviously, I'm learning in that, so it isn't like Doug's just handing me this, the keys to everything, and saying go and figure it out. And I'm glad that he's not. It's me taking, I believe, the next step in the next degree of what God is trying to mold me and shape me to be in by
Right.
closely working alongside of Doug, and him looking over saying, all right, now I believe it's time to trust you with something even more. You know what I mean? But not
Yes.
just saying, go and figure it out. It's like, no, like, let's start working on these things together. And it's really, really beautiful because it's stretching me. It's causing me to, I say elevate my thinking, but not in a prideful way, but I'm having to see things, not just
Yeah.
through, oh, we have this skate park, or we have this skate contest coming up. It's more of like, nope. And a huge part of what I'm doing, or where I believe it started, was understanding the value, because God isn't giving me something like this if like, or sorry, he's not going to give me something like this if I don't first understand the value in his kingdom or in his eyes of how we use this. Because especially
Right.
in the action sports world and what we do, it can be so easy to get caught up in all the fun that we're doing, because what we do is a lot of fun. We get to be around a lot of people and build a lot of relationships, but sometimes that can interfere with the responsibility aspect of stuff. And
Yeah.
so, because of the relationship I've had with Doug leading up to this point, and seeing the value of favor one, when we create events that bring people around us that then give us an opportunity to share with them something different. So, for example, there's
Yes.
already people who are doing skate contests, who are in the skate community. Like, skateboarding is going to keep doing its thing. But
Mhm.
as believers, how do we create something through Holy Spirit's desire for us to create something that people then would want to come to, that
Right.
when they step into our atmosphere, it's not like we force on them this message as much as we do share and show with them living expressions of God, God's love, God's creativity, like how fun. I mean, it may sound so cheesy, but how fun God can be. Like God
Yeah.
desires to have fun. I mean, He's the author of fun. You know, like
Right.
everyone desires to have fun, but He's the source of that. So for
Yes.
us, it's like, man, how do we create the best atmosphere of skateboarding that ministers to the kids by championing them, ministers to the families by showing them that there are people in this industry who don't just seek to take but seek to give.
Give.
And and by like how well we do our events, we win favor with the kids, but by our heart, in some senses, we win favor with the whole family, to where now we have families who want to be around us, kids who, like, literally, I mean, when we take trips out of Brunswick and go an hour and a half, 2 hours away, there are families who without question want their kids to be around us because they know our heartbeat. Like, we're
Right.
not seeking to take, we're seeking to give, and the kids want to be around us. It's not like, and not to say anything bad about, like youth crew, but it's almost like, it's sometimes, like, because the parents are going to church, it's almost like kids sometimes have to go to youth crew, which doesn't always invite this fluid relationship, because it's almost like I have to be here, and the youth pastor has to find something that I'm going to enjoy doing at times. Not saying, like God can use
No,
that,
I
and
hear
it's
you.
beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah. But with this, it's almost like they want to be here. And
Right.
because they want to be here, then, I mean, and this is me kind of elaborating on what I've seen is and got to experience. But because there's no force in relationship, and it's all out of the desire to want to be around. And
Yeah.
on top of that, because what we do is a gift, where when people come into the hub, when kids come in or when they get around us, it's for free. So because they're not paying us to be here, going back to what we were talking about earlier, is I can hold a godly standard this high. And what it does is, like, and I work with, or not work with, but I get to be around a lot of younger guys, and for me, I know what it's like to be a younger guy, a punk. You're disrespectful, you think you got it all figured out. Any adult who tries to encourage you or say something to you, it's like, oh, whatever, you don't know any better, you're just old, like, so all these mindsets that a young guy can
Right.
have. But what it does, but kind of going back to it, is like, because I understand where they're at and they're not paying me to serve them, I can hold a standard, and if they don't rise to that standard, like like and not in a bad way, but you don't have to be here, because you're
Right.
not paying to be here. This is a gift. And the thing is, I know you want to be here. So, and on top of that, sorry, I know I'm going down a tangent. On top of that, what I'm trying to fight for you to conform to is a standard that's going to give you life, because it's rooted out of God's standard. You know what I mean?
Amen.
So it's like, so
Yeah.
so so me telling you that you need to go say sorry and ask for forgiveness because of a mistake that you had, or being mean or being rude, or that you're not going to cuss here, you're not going to use this place for evil, like you're not going to disrespect the staff members here, you're not going to treat our stuff with disrespect. It's like, although in the moment it's so hard for these younger guys or even these people to conform to, because it's something so contrary to what the world's showing them,
Right.
because they're not paying to be here, and because we have the favor by the relationships that we have, what I believe we're all seeing, what I'm seeing, is this younger generation rise to this godly standard, not knowing that it's God's standard, but rising to the standard that gives them life at the end of it.
Right.
Because going back to choices, there's consequences to choices. And so for a
Yep.
lot of these younger guys, they're making choices that have bad consequences. But that
Right.
doesn't mean that I should keep them there. I should give them an opportunity to choose something good, to where I
Yes.
can bless their choice to do something good and godly. And in them choosing a better standard, it's not only going to give them life, it's going to show them how to be a young man. It's going to instill in them godly virtues, and it's going to give them the opportunity for a male figure that they look up at, and like, think is cool, and think is, whatever they may think, an opportunity to be like, man, I am so proud of you for doing this. Like, I see you putting in the work. I see you, like, working through these things that are challenging, and I just want to let you know that I am so, so, so proud of you. And in that, I believe I'm getting to be an expression of God, because God desires to bless us. He desires to give us all these good things. He's a good father.
Amen.
But when we disobey, he has to discipline us because he loves
Yeah.
us. And in the same way, for these younger guys, I believe that it is an obligation of mine to, when I see them misbehave and be disrespectful and do something sinful, I have to disobey them. And not that I give them a spanking or anything, but it's like I have to call them out, and I have
Yeah.
to, in some senses, embarrass them in front of their friends to help them see that what you're doing isn't right and isn't good, so that I
Right.
can then bless them when I see them make a good choice.
Wow.
It is beautiful, because what it is, I believe, is when Jesus speaks of leaven in the kingdom and how it just spreads without
Hmm.
even realizing it's spreading. I believe what we're getting to do is create an incubator for these kids to experience God's kingdom being spread throughout their life, in their thoughts, in their words, in their actions, in their behavior, that by the time they're old enough, and I say old enough, but you don't really have to be a certain age, but when God's appointed time to reveal himself to them comes, when they, or if they choose to walk in that, what they're going to see is that they've already been walking in God's commandments and
Yeah.
God's and God's standard of life. And it all started through some simple piece of wood with four wheels on it that they found an outlet in. It all started with them a relationship of someone who was willing to look over and find them valuable. You know what I mean? It's like it's just so life-giving when
It
you
is.
see how God's kingdom is not limited by our thoughts, or even like our structure of,
Yeah.
like you could say like church at times, but it's so, I believe it's like so ready to be advanced that God's willing to use anything today,
Come
you know,
on.
to go after this younger generation that anybody who has eyes to see can see is being deceived, being robbed, being confused, being taken advantage of, and being manipulated by the enemy and by the world. That something as simple as skateboarding, God is eagerly desiring to use in order to go after his children, because they're his first. And when they walk through the door, it's not like we're doing anything other than getting to meet one of his who may not know that they're his yet. And by our atmosphere of purity and holiness, by our words, by our actions, by our, by what we do and the fun that we create, we're winning favor and inviting this younger generation to rise to a standard that's life giving. And it is so amazing to watch personally, like so amazing. So that's kind of what I do on a weekly, monthly, kind of day to day basis.
Oh, I love that. That's just what you do. Just changing lives every day.
Well, I mean,
That's
like
so
today the
great.
hub's closed, but yeah, I mean
Oh, it's
yeah,
amazing, Noah. It's
yeah.
amazing, and got me so excited just sitting here listening to it. I know that Bella had another question.
Okay.
You could ask the same one as you did before, unless you have something else you want to ask. So, what is the best advice that you'd give me, like someone my age?
Best advice, if you haven't heard it already, because like you've heard Doug, you've heard Mason. The best advice I could give someone like you is to look up and find someone who is older that you look up and say, man, I see the fruit of their relationship with God, or man, I just really like the way that this person is living their life. And if they're a believer, walk up and ask them to share with you what they wish they would have known when they were in your age, in some sense, if that makes sense. Because what it really is it's like a form of discipleship, where if we're called to make disciples, that means that at some point we should be disciples. You know what I mean? It's yes, yes, we're called to make disciples, but not everyone's called in that specific season to go and make disciples. Some people, I believe, in some seasons are called to be disciples. And so for like someone your age and going through the season of life that you're going through, I would say honestly, it can be really confusing and really hard to kind of figure out what God may have created you for, or your purpose in this world, because there's so many misconceptions of what that looks like, especially through social media. You see so many people present their life as if they have it figured out, but in reality, I guarantee you they don't. Because if they don't know God and they're not walking with God, then they don't. No matter how much fun it looks like they're having. And so I would say, as far as where you're at, find someone who you feel like, man, I really want to look up and just start allowing this person to hold me to a level of accountability, start asking them questions and growing in my relationship with God. And also just realizing that the things that you really in your heart enjoy doing, God can meet you in. Like God really desires to meet you in, and don't compartmentalize. Oh, okay. Well, in this podcast, I'm with God. But then after this podcast ends and I go back to just hanging out or whatever you may be doing, I'm not going to be meeting with God. It's like, no, realize that, man, God, he wants to be with you. Like he desires to actively be speaking to you. And you have an opportunity to be a leader in your generation, not by having it all figured out, but by knowing the truth of who you are. Like one of the biggest things I could encourage someone who's younger like that is to spend time praying, reading, asking questions, learning about how to grow in the awareness of your identity. Because there are so many kids who don't know who they are, and they fall victim to this mindset of letting their peers influence their behavior, which is a horrible thing, because they don't know any more than you do about how to walk this godly life necessarily, per se, if they're just kind of living their life. But if you can realize that there are people who are older that desire for you to become who God's created you to be, then you no longer will fall to their standard. You can actually set a standard of love and of truth that you'll see God will use to give you favor with people who need to just have a friend, who need to have someone they can just talk to, who need to have someone who can point them in a direction of truth and won't point them toward this way of just continuing to distract themselves through life. Because this is just kind of what it is. But like, man, there is a day coming. I believe it's drawing more closer by the day where he will come back. And there is an age of accountability that I think we've forgotten, where, I mean, if you're aware enough to know what you're doing is right or wrong, then God's going to hold you accountable to what you chose to do. Personally, that's just my belief. But I think that generation just isn't being discipled, isn't being poured into, isn't being shown a good standard. And they're just kind of defaulting to what they think is right, which sometimes isn't right. And it doesn't always it doesn't always lead to this mindset of like, man, okay, I'll just take me for example, because that's my best example. When I started getting into trouble, or I'll just use doing drugs, not saying by any means that that's going to be what you do, but it could just be anything. What I didn't see was that 5, 6, 7 years down the road, what that was going to lead me to. No one ever stopped and told me that. And I guarantee you, if I would have had someone who was willing to just talk to me and let me know, not necessarily that I would have changed in that moment, but I wouldn't have been able to move forward without ignorance no longer. So I don't know if that kind of makes any sense, but just my encouragement would be just take some time and realize that you're not necessarily in a rush to grow in what God says about you, and just really believe it and allow Holy Spirit to just walk with you through the season of life. He's not expecting you to have it all figured out. He knows you. He knows where you're at. He knows what you've gone through. And he's not looking for you to be, let's just say, take your mom who's who's a mature believer. You don't have to be where your mom is at right now in this season of life. But you have an amazing opportunity to learn from the things that your mom has gone through in life, or learn from what she's learning from God, to where how old are you, Bella?
15.
Yeah, 15. At 15 years old, you can be learning and experiencing the fruit of what your mom has spent a long time, or me, a long time having to work through, if that makes sense. So basically, what my ceiling is, you're going to get to walk on my ceiling to then create a higher ceiling for someone.
Nice.
Where you don't have to go through the failures or the insecurities of being subject to your own thoughts, but you actually get to grow in your identity of who God's made you to be, and be around people who like have the desire to help you in that. So I guess that would be my encouragement is find someone, one, who you can communicate things to, And then also let that person be someone who then can pour in truth that you trust, because you're gonna have to learn how to open up your heart to somebody who can pour in truth, but then also who can help fight for your heart despite you may not wanting to at times. Because as good as it may sound, there are times in my life when I do not want Doug holding me to a higher standard.
Right.
I naturally want to just slack, but like, and I don't want to enable or say that's a good thing, but it's just the reality of where I'm at. But I'm so thankful I have someone fighting for me to rise to the standard God has for me, because because it pays out in the long run. And I end up experiencing the goodness and what we talked about earlier, the inheritance that comes to just rising to that standard. And so, but I think at 24, I'm learning what you could at 15 very easily. At 15, you could be experiencing what I'm experiencing in relationship with God if you could just humble yourself to realize that you don't have it figured out. You don't need to have it figured out, but you can actually enjoy being a student and having the time to where you can just grow in your relationship with God. So that would be my encouragement. And I don't know if all that kind of intertwines and makes a whole bunch of sense, but and I can keep kind of elaborating on trying to consolidate it, but just but yeah, just kind of realizing that like he loves you and he's for you and he wants to walk with you through that. And there's no pressure to walking with God in the sense, especially at 15, because like you don't have all these bills and responsibilities that older, like in my case, 24, I have, to where I have to manage my time, because if I do something wrong, there could be severe consequences to it. It's like at 15, if you were trying to learn how to hear God's voice and you think, oh man, like I think I'm supposed to do this, but then you realize like, okay, maybe I wasn't hearing God correctly, in that there's no severe consequences to that. You're still learning. You know what I mean? And you have your mom there to kind of help create this safe space for you to go after learning and hearing from God. So I don't know. It's just, I think it's just a real cool opportunity that you do have at 15 to have what I did, which was someone fighting for me. So.
Oh, that is so powerful. Does that bless you? Did it make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I know that was kind of scattered.
No, it's so good. It was so good. I just want to say to Bella and to all those out there, 15, 16, or somebody in that age, like, I love that. Walk on my ceiling. That really ministered to me. Let's get that next generation to walk on our ceiling and raise the bar, right?
Yes. I mean, literally, Jesus said, all that you see that I do, you will do even greater things than these.
That's right.
That's Jesus. Like that. I mean, it's hard for me even to fathom that being like true, but it's like I have to believe it's true because he said it, and he only said what he heard the Father say. So it's like, okay, Lord, well, I got to take you at your word and believe that what you're saying is true. And I think beyond just the blessing of that, the principle of what Jesus, because who he was speaking to was his disciples.
Right.
Like who he was speaking to his disciples. And if we're making disciples, they should at some point be walking on or doing even greater things that we're doing. You know what I mean? But it doesn't make them any better. It just means that they're going to get to see and do even greater things, because what has taken us time, like years, you may get to learn in a few months.
Yeah, like that.
Right.
Wow. That's so good, Noah. Oh my gosh. Noah, thank you. How do people connect with you, follow you, learn more about you and all you're doing?
So I am on Facebook as Noah Johnson. I'm on Instagram as Noah Johnson with 3 N's in Johnson. So if you just type in Noah Johnson and you put 3 N's on the end, or if you go to our website at veritasshapes.org and you go to our home team, you'll find out my email, which is noah@veritasshapes.org. So those are just a few ways
to find you. I love it. Oh my gosh.
Hey, I'm also in Brunswick, Georgia. So if you're ever stopping through, I'm going to be at the hub, most likely, 1208 Gloucester Street. So just for anybody passing through, that's another way you can find me too.
That's another way. And the hub is awesome. So if you're going to be in Brunswick or anywhere near there, you got to go to the hub. Make sure that you get there. All right. Anything else, Bella? No? All right. Well, this has been so inspiring. Noah, you just have such a way of just pouring out the truth and the love of God. Just a beautiful, powerful mixture. You're an anointed man, and it's going to be so fun to watch what God is going to be doing in you and through you for the rest of your life, forever and ever. Amen. I want to thank you for being here today. We want to have you come back maybe at the beginning of the fall and tell us about all the great things that God has done through, all of the hard work you guys are pouring out into the youth in the Brunswick area and beyond. I'm trying to figure out a way. Well, I want to restate that. I'm believing for God to show me the way that I can get back down there and bring her and her brother, that they can get back down and be in some of those camps. So I'm excited to see how God works that out this year. But I want to thank you so much for taking all of this time to share your heart and your story, because your story matters and it has impacted me greatly. You too. Yeah.
Well, I am thankful for the opportunity to, seriously, even just for you creating the space for me to be able to share these things is just as valuable as me getting on here and sharing them. So thank you.
So cool. Thank you so much. And to everybody else that's been watching and listening, I know you've been challenged. I know you've been changed. I've got pages of notes here that I took, pages of them. So I am sure that you have as well. Please follow up and connect up with this ministry, connect up with this man of God, and pray for him, support him, and do us a favor. Like it and share it, subscribe, like it and share it. There are people right now whose lives are hanging in the balance. They are. And they need to hear Noah's story. And you can be the extension of the Lord and get this message to them in a difficult time. You can bring the light into the darkness. You can send this in an email. You can share it through messaging. You can post it on social media. You could send it in a text. There's so many ways to get this message out to people. And so let's do it. Let's take it global. I think that Noah's story about the vape in the lake just has so much further to go than it already has. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. And remember, you are here on purpose, with a purpose, by design, not by default. So go out there and be the salt and the light everywhere you go. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for Purpose by Design with Dr. Pamela Hinkle. You can learn more about Dr. Pamela and her world at purposewithpamela.com. See you next time on Purpose by Design.